Yo, what's up to everybody out there? Welcome to another edition of the Roundtable Talk. I am your host, C-Money. Once again, we are back here. This is another episode. Earlier, we did an episode showcasing the USA flea market, which once was, and we did an episode about that and gave you a background of the flea market there. And now we are here in the Opa-locka Hialeah area. Let's check out this bus. This is one of the newest bus services. We talked about that earlier. We are here in the Opa-locka Hialeah flea market. Just walked under the 924 right in the expressway, and right over, if you can see, that is Amelia Earhart Park, which I did do a walkthrough of before coming over here. But we did a video of Amelia Earhart Park a while back. Just check out my hotspots in South Florida. And here is this facility here. Used to be, we're on, by the way, we're on Northwest 42nd Avenue, which is also known as Richmond Road. And this facility here used to be a DMV, a driver's license facility. This is where I got my first ID when I stayed in Opa-locka. But I just wanted to showcase that because we are now coming to this location. And we're going to be talking about this as well, too. Now, this location, this is called the North Dade Fairgrounds. If you ever, visited Miami, if you've been in the Opa-locka Hialeah area, this was called the North Dade Fairgrounds. But a lot of you don't know it as the North Dade Fairgrounds. A lot of you know it as the location for the Opa-locka Hialeah. It's a place to be. It was called the Opa-locka Hialeah Flea Market, which was one of the premier outdoor flea markets here in South Florida. Now, I couldn't get much research on this because, as you know, this got gentrified and relocated. We'll talk about that in a minute. This location, just like the other location we talked about earlier, the USA Flea Market, from my understanding, was opened up in 1985, which was the same year that approximately the USA Flea Market opened up. They both opened up in the same year. Now, this flea market was one of the largest in outdoor flea markets here in South Florida. Not saying that it is the largest, because you do have the swap shop as well, but this was one of the largest, in my book, outdoor flea markets in the area. And as a matter of fact, this was one of my first working jobs here. I remember I did a video a while back that one of my actual first jobs was working at a Winn-Dixie there in the Miami Gardens Hialeah area, if you go back to my episode on that. But this was a job that I was selling sodas to customers, to shoppers that shopped out here to the flea market. Now, excuse me. Now, back in the 90s, I was just going to say 1900s, but not that old. Back in the 90s, this location was a premier spot for the local residents of Hialeah and of Opa-locka. Of course, Liberty City residents had the USA Flea Market, and of course, Miami Gardens residents, they had another flea market, which we might be able to get to today, but I'm not for sure if we're going to be able to get to it, but we're going to stick to this one right now. This was the premier flea market for the Opa-locka and Hialeah residents. Now, I worked here, I believe either 96 or 97, I'm not for sure, because months later, thanks to a relative of mine told me that Winn-Dixie was hiring. They opened up a new Winn-Dixie, and I was around 15 at the time. And I ended up getting a job at Winn-Dixie months later after I left here, because, the team, we were selling canned sodas for $1 to the customers, and that's how I learned the term agua frita aquí, which means something about come get your water or something like that. I don't remember, And because this was predominantly a Hispanic and Creole supermarket. And not only that, I came back in the early 2000s, maybe around 2006, 2007, and I ended up opening up a music store here. I don't know if I mentioned that in my previous videos, that here I ended up opening a music store here. That's at the time when, you know, music stores was actually popping. I told you in a video previously, like, music stores are not in now because you have streaming apps like Pandora and Spotify and YouTube Music and Apple Music and a lot of that. So you don't really have a lot. So my music store was basically a urban music store, which sold, you know, R&B, hip hop, gospel. You know, I also made cassette tapes, and I also sold DVDs, you know, and I also, you know, sold, you know, pre-recorded or mixtapes and mixed CDs. You know, for the untrained mind, you know what that means in urban terms, but to the professional term, it was mixed CDs and mixtapes and things like that. But as always, my business crumbled because this flea market was a bit of a struggle. I mean, a lot of people did make money, but the rent was ridiculous. The rent was due every week. So I was paying $150 every week. So add that up times 4 weeks. Because at first when I moved in, it was $145, but the rent was going up $5. And they did give me 2 weeks free, you know, and that was, you know, to set up my shop and everything and all that, and prominently make a profit. But when I wasn't really making as much as I thought I was, because you realize most of the music stores that was out here was mostly playing Hispanic and Latin music, and I really didn't have the fan base. And then back then I wasn't into Facebook and social media like that to promote my business. I only had, you know, the shoppers that came out here to this location, and, you know, when they walk by, they say, "Ooh, okay." Now, this location has been here since 2023 because the last time I was here, they tried to spice up this. Now, over the years, before this closed, they tried to rebrand this place to make it more of a family-friendly flea market. They, at one point in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, they tried to rebrand by adding attractions here. They once wanted to try to get little kiddie rides and stuff out here. They did sit at once. They had like a little mini carousel or like a ride, I don't remember what it was, that sat in the parking lot that never got operated and never opened up. And then they wanted to have a little kiddie section where, you know, they had the little, I don't know if you ever seen it in the malls, where they have the little electrical animals that you sit on and you ride around in certain parts of the mall. They once wanted to do that. And then they also started having little shows like car shows and little boxing matches and stuff like that. They even put a boxing ring inside of here and a actual stage. Now, the last time I was here in 2022, they ended up having the Opa-locka Hialeah fair, because I took me and a girl I was dating, but I'm still dating the girl, and we ended up going on a date here, and they ended up hosting the first and only Opa-locka Hialeah flea market, where it opened up around like maybe 5 or 6 in the afternoon. So you get there a little early, you do a little shopping. When they close, you come out, you get on some rides and stuff. And I was guessing that was one of many more to come with that. But then after a year later, and back in 2023, they decided to close this location. Now, altogether, rebranding this, really thought that this was going to make something out of it. Now, unlike the USA flea market, this location has yet to see any kind of operation. Because remember earlier when we did the USA flea market location, that became a storage facility for 18-wheelers and tractor trailers. Now, this building here is a newly building. Now, this area also was a open lot, and back in the late 80s, early 90s, this was also part of the Opa-locka Hialeah flea market. I remember as a little kid my brother and his friends used to work at a location on this side, and they used to sell like socks and t-shirts and stuff to customers. And there was not many stores. There was a very few stores that sat over here, because this was part of the flea market. And this was also a parking area for people who wanted to come and shop here. And with this location, at one point they had a little tram, not a like electrical tram, like one of them little tram cars or trucks or whatever you want to call it, them little tram trolleys or whatever you call it, that used to pick up people and transport them from this side to this side. Now eventually that got stopped, and then they eventually closed this area, and it became an open area for another business. But this just recently got built. I don't know how long it's been there, because I rarely come up this way, but this recently got built. Then when this got taken away, most of the businesses was here. At one point they even built a rideshare stop here inside of the flea market, which was roughly at this gate right here, because there was 3 entrances. There was the entrance right there next to the DMV, the former DMV. I don't know what building that is now. There was the entrance right here, and then there was an entrance right there. This was the only flea market I can tell you that produced food out of it. I know they sold fish and produce. Now, me, I don't know, but I know like a lot of the buildings that sat on the back end, because this is 47th Avenue. If you walk through here and go to the back, there's a street called 37th Avenue Douglas Road, which is also known as the 37th/42nd Avenue Douglas Lejeune connector, because 37 connects with 42nd Avenue and further down past Amelia Earhart. Now, one of the fun amenities that wasn't in the flea market was further in the back. If you can see in the back, here is a bunch of warehouses. Now, in the flea market near the 37th Avenue backway, there was a go-kart racing track in the back. Now, I had the privilege of going there back in the mid-2000s. It was called, I would think, GPX or something. I forgot the name of it. It no longer exists because, you know, one day we decided to roll by there and see, and ignore the go-kart track might be still there. Now, that wasn't a part of the flea market. It was that you had to go through because they did have a back entrance to the flea market. I didn't tell you that. They did have a back entrance from 37th Avenue. It was just only one back entrance. There was 3 entrances that I just showed you to the front of the flea market, and then there was a back entrance from 37th Avenue. And that back entrance, you saw the go-kart area. Now, it was $25 for a 10-minute ride. I had the company of doing it by myself. I then had the company of racing with my brother, and I also had the company of racing with one of my friends. But that eventually got taken away. I don't know if it still exists, but I know that now you can't go there to race. And I used to always, like, every other, like, maybe once or twice, I'd come from the flea market, walk over there to the go-karts, go ride the go-karts for a little bit, and I'd be like, woohoo, go-karts. And then when the flea market started wanting to add their own little touch, they wanted to add some amenities for the kids, you know. They wanted to add like a little kiddie area, which never really happened and stuff. And if you remember the flea market, there was a big Archer sign that sat near the entrance. Now, the parking on the weekdays was free, but on the weekends, you had to pay. And it was maybe like $1 or $2, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I did mention that I did have a store out here back in like 2006, 2007. When I last visited, the last few times I visited before they could shut down, the location that I had ended up turning into a parking lot. This is how I knew that the flea market was going down, because a lot of businesses could not, for one, some of the businesses could not keep up with the payments because you had to pay rent every week. Even though the rent was cheap, $150 a week, that's not bad, but you know, that leads up to like $500-600 a month, you know. But if you're not selling the goods that people will want, it's not, you know, a good place for you. And when I last went, they tore down the location because all the locations was in sections of rows that was by letters. You had row A, row AA, row B, row BB, and it went all the way down to that. I was in row PP. My business location was PP13. So this was kind of a deal. So, you know, but when I saw that the location that I was at turned into a parking lot, it kind of let me further know that this place was going downhill. When I was a little kid, I used to come out here, and this was one of the first few places I've ever. Let's go. This is one of the first few places. Oh, let's get the heck out of me. This is one of the first few places that I've ever had Chinese food. You know, because I used to come out here and get my, you know, pepper steak and rice and stuff like that. And then I grew up. I started, you know, coming out here for other varieties and stuff. This is one of the spots that my mom used to love and come shop at and things like that. So we used to come out here as a kid, and as a grown up, I used to come out here. Sometimes I buy nice little outfits out here, and they had a video game store where I bought old Nintendo, retro Nintendo from. I used to buy my video games here, and I used to come buy watches, and sometimes I used to get shoes at discount prices, you know, not used shoes, because there were a lot of booths out here that sold used merchandise like work pants and work shoes and stuff like that. But, you know, if you wanted a good bargain, you came out here as well. And the closing of this, I believe, happened around 2023. Now, the reason for this closing, I honestly cannot tell you what was the main purpose of this place closing. If you have any information on the reason of this closing, you can just comment at the bottom of this page. You can also, you know, email me. I'll give you that information after a while. But if you have memories as well, you can also comment too, because this was one of my childhood hangout spots where, you know, I used to take the bus here and stuff like here. Now they only have that little mini bus, the Metro Link, that comes out here, because they used to have 2 buses that came out here, but now with the new better bus network that we talked about earlier, it's, you know, there are not many bus options, and this place predominantly is nothing. But this now sits as a holding cell for looks like sand and rocks. I would have thought, because of the name of the location, which is the North Day Fairgrounds, they was going to either turn this into a event space and make it to where you can like have concerts and stuff like this, or turn it into a place where they can hold, like, you know, how they did the Opa-locka Hialeah fair and anything like that. But for right now, this just is it's just sand and rock. Now there might be plans of putting this into good use, into another development, but as of right now, I know there is no plans for that. If you have any information on what you think or what will become of this, just comment at the bottom. You can also email me, because I would love to know, like, what is it that this will become after a while. Here it is, another look at the Metro Link Lejeune. That's a bus stable. That's a little mini van service, kind of like this little van that's coming up right here. This is what it looks like. It looks like something like this, and it carries a few passengers, and it stretches all the way from the Opa-locka Tri-Rail station all the way to the Miami Airport Metro Rail station. So, you know, if we're lucky, we might get to see one. If not, it's not it. This is the other exit, and this was on their exit, because here they had the little spikes that come up out of the ground, and if you back up, it will, you know, damage your tires. So here was just an exit, but the other 2 entrances, other 2 I was showing you was entrances and could be an exit. So this is it. This is the old Opa-locka Hialeah flea market. It's set here on the June Road, North, which is also known as Northwest 42nd Avenue. It was north of the Grantney Expressway 924, north of Amelia Earhart, and it was on the borderline of Hialeah and Opa-locka. That's why it was called Opa-locka Hialeah. Now, this was one of the places that had a catchy tune. Opa-locka Hialeah. Opa-locka Hialeah is for a place to be, you know, and they had a catchy song. And I'm quite sure on YouTube you can probably catch that song, you know, and everything. But it was if you used to come here as a child, or if you came here as an adult, you can see City of Hialeah there, one of their garbage trucks. You know, if you came here as a child or if you came here as an adult and you knew about this place, it was a premier spot for a lot of us. It was a spot that a lot of us loved and cherished. It was a spot that a lot of us, you know, we came out here to get our school clothes. We came out here to get discounted shoes. We came out here, you know, for discount merchandise and watches and jewelry. You know, if you wanted to get your cell phone fixed, they had repair shops. If you wanted furniture, you know, they had a furniture store out here, several. If you wanted to have some nice food, or they had entertainment out here at one point. They even did, you know, performances like plays and shows for the little kids and for adults, and boxing matches and stuff like that. They had a lot out here, so it was something decent. So it was something nice to come out here. So if you have any memories, any fond memories of this, you know, you can comment at the bottom of this page. Let me know what, you know, what you feel, you know, how you feel about this, the location, you know, how you feel about them closing the flea market. Was it a good thing? Was it a bad thing? Do you think that the flea market shouldn't have gotten closed? Do you think they should have rebranded it into something else? You know, do you think that it was a good option? What do you think will become of this? If you have any notion of what this place will become, let me know, you know, in the comments. You can also email me at roundtable00@yahoo.com, you know, because this is one of my childhood things. Just like with the USA Flea Market, this was one of my go-to places, because remember, I'm originally from the Opa-locka area, the Opa-locka Miami Gardens area, and this was one of the premier flea markets that I used to go to as a child. I worked here as a worker in my teenage years. I came back as an entrepreneur in my adulthood ages, and I came as a valued customer after that. But then again, it got shut down to where, yeah. Now coming up in our next video, it's gonna be a little bit more about this location, because when this location got shut down, it got moved to another location, which will be our next episode. But we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But as always, I want you to always know, stay safe, stay blessed, stay hydrated, and I will see you in the few minutes on the next episode. This is the Roundtable Talk here at the Opa-locka Hialeah Flea Market, the old location, and I will see you in a little bit. Take care.